Ho, 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 hello, and welcome to SpyHards podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, and Scott, now I have a machine gun. Ho, ho, ho. Oh, wait. I think I took a quote from the wrong Bruce Willis Christmas movie. Anyway,
moving swiftly on. Yes, it is the festive season. Happy holidays to you all. And continuing our tradition, we have a Christmas spy movie lined up for you. But before we get there, we have to induct our next round of SpyHards diehards. Now, how does one become a SpyHards diehard? I hear you all shout at us. Cam, can you shed some festive light on that question?
yes, of course, the way to make the SpyHards diehards list, which is even better than the knock list. That's right,
Whoa,
it is.
I didn't sign off on that. It's like second to the knock list, surely.
It's better than the disavowed list.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No slide whistles are in your future. That's true.
Yes, is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and tell the world how much you enjoy SpyHards, and then send us that review so that we can read it on the air.
Now, we have a notification system set up now, so wherever in the world you leave the 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, we are notified and we get to read it. And so this one is coming from the United States of America via the account Almost Forever. Very mysterious username. We don't know who you are, but we love this review. So here it goes. SpyHards diehards. Oh, they wanted to be in the club. You're in. Don't you worry about it. Almost Forever. You haven't got to wait for forever. It's now. Scott and Cam. I like to put it in the right order. Thank you.
Hey.
I start the show. Put on a great podcast that feels conversational while still being organized. And they also introduced me to some new spy movies. So that's always a plus.
You're welcome for Lancer Spy.
Oh, yes. British agent. Oh, you're very welcome, sir. Or ma'am, or whoever you may be. But there you are. Welcome to, I guess you are a festive inductee to the SpyHards diehards. Ho, ho, ho. And welcome aboard. But if you do want to get in there, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'll get notified and we'll read it out on the show. As long as it's a 5-star review, write whatever you'd like inside. Make a joke if you'd like. It'd probably be funny when we read it out. And if you want to support us even more, you can join us over on our Patreon. We have over 50 bonus episodes there. Patreon.com/SpyHards, or you can find a link in the show notes below. But Cam, people have been waiting to unwrap this present. Let's get to the review. All right, it's time. Let's unwrap the present, Cam. What are we talking about this week?
Yippee-ki-yay. We are talking about...
Whoa, deja vu.
We are talking about 2010's Red, starring Bruce Willis, Morgan Freeman, John Malkovich.
Cam run out of names, but there's lots more. There's a lot there.
Yes, there are so many there.
He's overwhelmed by the names
They're
of
not
people.
even listed in alphabetical order. It
Now,
drives me
listeners,
crazy.
Cam is the person who prepares all the notes for the show. Clearly, he hasn't prepared. He's been drinking a bit too much eggnog.
Helen Mirren.
Hey, she didn't she win an Oscar for playing the Queen?
She did indeed. Yes.
And then she did this.
Yes. That's right. Yes. So there is a star-studded cast working alongside Bruce Willis in Red, a spy action thriller. This sounds like the hallucination of a lunatic. I've had a bit too much eggnog, folks.
I just made that joke. What are you doing? I just said that.
The SpyHards office Christmas party has been a real rager, folks. I apologize.
Cam's the one in the corner, been drinking the punch bowl. Apparently, he's feeling a little frisky this Christmas time.
I'll be crying in mere moments.
Well, we haven't even got to the review yet. No, but you're right, Cam. It is a massive cast, and it's a film that we've been asked to cover a couple of times, but it's not one that looms particularly large in the sort of pantheon of spy movies, I would say.
No, that's true. Nor Christmas movies.
No.
In fact, it took us a little bit of time to realize that this was a viable Christmas option.
No, we put out a post recently on social media, and we're prompted to remember that this actually, and it does open with Christmas and close with Christmas. Like there's enough Christmas in here to justify its inclusion in the Spy Christmas film pantheon. I've used the word pantheon twice in 5 minutes. That's your bingo card for you. But if you've never seen Red, here is your synopsis, and you'll be pleased to know it's brief.
No, okay.
Red, still armed, still dangerous, still got it. When his peaceful life is threatened by a high-tech assassin, former Black Ops agent Frank Moses reassembles his old team in a last-ditch effort to survive and uncover his assailants.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yippee-ki-yay!
Yeah, what more can be said, really, about Red?
And that was your review, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next year. The next question we'd like to bring up is previous connections to the film. I mean, this is one of those rarities that I'd seen before we'd even started doing SpyHards. I remember just sort of being taken aback by the trailer for this film. I'm not necessarily sure I saw it in theaters,
Okay.
but I remember seeing the trailer and seeing Bruce Willis step out of the car whilst it was spinning and being like, wow, that's I know this is mostly effects, but that's still pretty cool.
I feel like that was a thing that happened in a lot of movies around that time. Did not Angelina Jolie do the same thing in Wanted? I feel like that was kind of a trend for a while, was people stepping out of moving cars.
If that's true, I haven't seen Wanted. I know. So for me, it's a Bruce Willis move.
Okay. I feel like maybe Tom Cruise did it in Jack Reacher, maybe too.
I can't answer that point, Cam, because I haven't seen that either. But hey, let us know, folks. Who stepped out of a moving car first? And probably the answer is Buster Keaton, but still.
Well, that's did they have cars then?
I was going to say, I'm pretty sure they did actually have cars at that point. God, what is Cam drinking?
They did, although they wouldn't go at the speeds to really accommodate the excitement that comes from seeing, say Bruce Willis do it.
5 mile an hour, and he just sort of like saunters out. Oh, what a stunt! The theater's like, whoa!
It's like putt. It's like the oyster mobile in Live and Let Die.
Oystermobile.
Yeah, remember the old man driving the oyster truck down the road?
No, that's gone from my head.
Oh well, there you go. That's a deep cut for the Bond fans out there.
Something to look forward to when we get to Live and Let Die. I'll keep my eye out for the oyster car. But what about you, Cam? Like, I'm assuming you've probably seen this in theaters, but had you seen it before?
Oh yeah, I saw this one in theaters, and actually, lots of movies I can remember the experience of seeing the movie, but I remember the entire day of going to see the movie Red.
Oh,
it was one of the most momentous moments in my entire life. No,
boy.
Not really, but
Where's this going?
It was when I was in journalism school, and the day that I went to that movie, I was actually covering a Michael Jackson thriller flash mob in Vancouver, and it was a worldwide thing, but I went to the Vancouver one to cover it for our school paper. It was part of my assignment for the program, and I remember being there for a big chunk of the day. Friend of the show, Tyler Orton, who was on our Diamonds Are Forever episode, came to join me at a certain time just to observe the experience and whatever. And then him and I went and saw Red that afternoon. And so, that is my memory of the movie Red. And that is my memory of the movie Red.
You saying you didn't moonwalk your way out of the theater afterwards?
I think we both walked out going like, yeah, that was fun. But I gotta be honest with you, when I sat down to watch it the other night, I remembered almost nothing. Like, it was like watching a movie for the first time.
I had a similar experience, and one of my first notes, and then something I looked back to at the end, is I'd forgotten how much of a Bruce Willis film this was.
Right.
I had a memory of it being an ensemble piece, which it becomes by the end, but really it's a two-hander with Bruce Willis and Mary-Louise Parker.
Yes, what I really remembered most of all was Helen Mirren with the machine gun, because that was like in all the trailers.
Sure.
They really marketed the heck out of that. And then also John Malkovich, I think maybe the moment where he like leaps out or something. I think that was also in the trailers a lot.
I mean, this film revolves around John Malkovich being unhinged, so I'm here for it.
Like, he was kind of like trailer bait, right? Like, because you have those really wacky, broad John Malkovich moments, and they're very easy to fit into trailers if you're trying to sell the kind of the goofiness of the movie.
Yeah, which I imagine they were leaning on. I just remember that bit with the car, because that's probably the one of the key stunts of the film.
And it's funny because I did not remember that.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get into our experience of that, but I'm curious to know, because this is a franchise we're starting here. We're going to tackle Red 2 down the line, but we need to track the genesis of it. Where did the Red franchise come from?
It actually came from a graphic novel, or
Okay.
3-issue comic series that was put together into a graphic novel, but they always say later on, based on the graphic novel. So it was written by Warren Ellis, who is pretty reputable writer in the world of comics. And in terms of like the stuff people may have heard of, he wrote the Iron Man Extremis arc, which became Iron Man 3, was adapted into the Iron Man 3 film, elements of it. Yeah. And he also worked on Moon Knight, and he was the one that kind of relaunched that character into the version that was made into the Marvel TV show. The TV show was nowhere near as good as his comic book work, but that's when it kind of, Moon Knight suddenly found a place in sort of modern day comics. He was someone who felt a little archaic leading into that.
Okay, cool. So he had some sway going into this. And was the comic book well received, or was it kind of that at that point where like studios were just buying comic books to turn them into potential projects?
Oh, we'll get to that. To that.
I'll sit back. Sorry.
Yes, and I should say, Red, the art was done by Cully Hamner, who is also just warhorse of a comic artist. You go through, he's worked on like every major book, just one of the big talents in art in comics. Cool. And so this comic was put out through kind of DC Comics has an imprint called Homage Comics, which works through Wildstorm. It's kind of a convoluted thing, but it basically came out under an imprint called Homage Comics, ultimately owned by DC Comics, though.
Sure.
Sort of, different umbrellas here, just to differentiate it, because the content of it was much more darker and hard-boiled, not the sort of thing that necessarily belongs next to Superman on the shelf, for example.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. Even movie studios do the same thing. You've got like Searchlight or whatever it is a division of someone.
Exactly.
Can't remember. Yeah, there's lots of stuff like that. That makes sense. That tracks.
Yeah, Disney has Touchstone and what have you.
Yeah.
So, exec producer of this film, Red, Gregory Novick, became a big fan of this comic story. And he was working for DC as kind of like their Hollywood wheeler dealer. His job was to basically interest them in projects. Get Warner Brothers to make, like, say, Batman films or whatever else. He would pitch ideas to them based on their characters.
Watchmen, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he really believed in this graphic novel. It was a very simple, hard-boiled graphic novel. I read the synopsis of it. This movie takes little bits of it. But really, it is very different. It is much more of just a hard-edged story that's quite simple. It does not have this big supporting cast. A lot of those things are all new additions for the script. So it was very much like we kind of like this throwback to, noir storytelling. This could be a really cool movie. That's kind of how it started.
Kind of like Men in Black is a bit outlandish but very down to earth, pardon the pun. And then it gets turned into this fantastical film with Will Smith.
Exactly. That's a great comparison. Yeah. And so Novick went to Warner Brothers, and they just were not interested. Mm-hmm. And it was the lack of superheroes. They just were like, this isn't really our thing.
But this Zack Snyder guy, we love him.
Well, yeah. Let's not talk about the DCEU. And so the creators then, Warren Ellis and Cully Hamner, exercised an element of their contract, which was the right to shop it elsewhere if, the Warner Brothers wasn't interested.
Sure.
And so that took actually years, because what happened was Warner Brothers was like, okay, we don't want to make the movie, but we've got to run this through all of our other divisions to see if there's anything in here that might work, for example, on TV. And so it took years to clear the rights for them to basically be able to sell Red to other studios. Several years later, De Bonaventura Pictures was interested in the property, so they attached themselves, and Novick brought in writers to shape this, fairly concise graphic novel into something that could be more of a mainstream entertainment.
So when these pictures were being taken around originally to DC and DC's internal studios and things like that...
It's Warner Brothers. because Warner Brothers owns DC.
Oh, I'm sorry, Warner Brothers. Yeah, sorry, Warner Brothers. You're right. They're just pitching the comic book itself. They haven't done like a some sort of a screenplay, or they haven't done like a pitch document. It's just like, here are the comics. Do you want to do something with it? Yes or no?
It's very much a DC guy going to the studios and saying, or to Warner Brothers, I should say, and saying, hey, this would make a great movie. What do you think?
That sounds like a great job.
Right? I wouldn't mind that.
I'm just going to go pick up all the comic books and be like, do you want this? No? Okay. This? No? Okay. That'll be $100,000 a year, please.
And I'm sure Gregory Novak makes more than a podcaster does.
Oh.
Yeah. So they brought in writers John and Eric Hober. They're brothers, and they started off their career with a 1998 Tarantino riff called Montana with Kira Sedgwick and Stanley Tucci. I have not seen this movie.
Okay.
But a handful of years later, 2009, they did the movie Whiteout with Kate Beckinsale, which is sort of a, I think, horror thriller, I think. It was not particularly successful, but basically jumping off of that movie, they did Red. And since then, their career has been basically just big studio guys. They have written or worked on Battleship, Meg and Meg 2, My Spy, Transformers Rise of the Beasts, and then, of course, Red 2.
You led us off on a bad path there when you said Battleship, but you did bring it back down with Meg and Meg 2, which I know you're a big fan of.
They're entertaining enough, yes. But I should note, like, a lot of these movies that I just named, in fact, almost all of them, had like an army of writers on them. Battleship had like something like 27 writers on it. I believe Transformers Rise of the Beasts had a number of them as well. So, you know, they are very much like the studio is going to bring them in, but they're probably going to be rewritten at some point.
Isn't there like a limit the Writers Guild of America will allow to have names attached?
There is. I mean, I would have to look up what that limit is, but you rarely would see more than, say, 6 on a finished film.
I watched an episode of a science fiction show I shouldn't mention recently, and I saw there was like teleplay by 4 people and then story by 4 other people. I was like, that is an insane amount of credits for a random episode of a TV show. I can only imagine what it's like on films, like especially with the Marvel films nowadays. Like, that they have a ton of hands, and that's even the ones that they acknowledge.
Yeah, you're gonna have your main writers, but there's like often writing rooms nowadays where maybe they get story credits and things like that. It gets very messy.
Sure.
But yeah, so these 2 brothers basically wrote Red and had to create a lot of the characters that are in the finished film. So, you know, Victoria, Joe, Marvin, Frank are all kind of created because even the lead Bruce Willis character, his character's name was Paul Moses in the book, and he was also just a completely different character. So a lot of this is pretty original material. They took very little, honestly.
Okay, well that's fine. There's a lot of times where concepts are taken and that's about it. Even like book adaptations do the same stuff. I've no problem with that.
Yeah, you could actually say that almost like the graphic novel Red is something even more akin to, say, like David Fincher's The Killer, which is out pretty recently at the time of recording. Not so much in being the same story, but just like that kind of stripped down genre exercise.
Methodical. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I might pick it up, actually. I might try and see if I can pick this up between Red 1 and Red 2. And just have a read.
It's about an agent who is decommissioned, who is sort of dragged back in by a hit squad and has to kind of like find out what's happened.
So that's the nugget of the story that this film has too, then. So there is that continuity. Okay.
Yeah, it's not a comedy though at all, the graphic novel. And so that's kind of the difference, and it's also just much more kind of a straightforward thing. And in the book, I know also the name Red just means that like at a certain point in the story, he goes from red to green, which means green, green is the target is back on him.
Oh, so Retired and Extremely Dangerous is made up for the film.
I think it is. I would have to actually read the 3-issue story to see if it is ever specified. But when you read the synopses of the graphic novel, they just say that it's like he's red because it means like he's off limits. But once he goes green, then, the game is on.
I mean, when I retire, I also intend to be branded red. But red means retired and extremely docile. Thank you. I'm here all year.
Not bad. That's how we should all be. So there was actually a quote from the graphic novel writer Warren Ellis during the period when Red was being turned into a script. And there was a quote that I found online. He said, "Read the Red script. Not bad. Not the book, but not bad. Funny. Especially when you know the casting. Very tight piece of work. Talked to the producers last week. They're all kinds of giddy over the casting coups. Who wouldn't want to see Helen Mirren with a sniper rifle?"
What a gleaming endorsement. What a huge embrace of the script there.
I like it. It's very short and to the point. I enjoyed that quote. And so basically they took this script then and pitched it all over town.
Mhm.
And only one studio was interested, and that was Summit. And Summit was kind of an up-and-coming little studio. And they were 5 months away at that point of releasing Twilight. So they
Wow,
weren't even on
okay.
the map yet. Whereas once Twilight comes out, Summit becomes a thing. And their logo means something.
Mm.
At this point in time, it doesn't. And so they were really into the DC branding of it. To them, it was like, this is great. If we can put something out that has DC Comics on it, that actually helps sell the movie. The way that I'm sure, say, Netflix does, picking up recently Red Alert Star Trek Prodigy. It's like they can market a Star Trek property under their own banner, right?
I actually had a genuine anecdote about Star Trek, and then I avoided it, and then you just dropped it for a Star Trek Prodigy nod. I mean,
Making
Red
the
Alert,
comparison.
we've done it. It's happened. There you go. Signal the alarm. No, but that does make sense, and the branding is important. I can't say I remember there seeing a DC logo at the start of the film.
There is, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
And so Summit, though, because they're a new player in town, they were a little nervous about the funding, which was not mega budget, but it was still pretty expensive. And so they approached Warner Brothers for co-funding, but were turned down. Warner Brothers was like, no, we still don't want anything to do with this.
They really don't want it, do they?
What scared them, especially at this point in time, was Jonah Hex and The Losers, both DC Comics adaptations that had been pretty significant bombs at the box office, which had basically taught them, stick to superheroes.
I remember Jonah Hex being a bomb. I remember absolutely nothing about The Losers.
Which will tell you about its box office prospects.
Who was in it?
Chris Evans was in it, Idris Elba,
Oh, wow.
Jason Patrick. There was a few. It's not bad, but I remember it ended on a cliffhanger, and
Oh,
so
no.
it's irrelevant.
It's a real dark universe.
Yeah, it was a really unfortunate decision.
Mm.
So, yeah, at this point, though, in the process, once Summit is pushing ahead, they hire Bruce Willis and Morgan Freeman, and then they hired the director. So actually, Bruce Willis and Freeman were attached before they even had a director. And for the director, they got Robert Schwentke, who was a German-born director whose initial 1993 effort, Heaven, came out. It was not well reviewed, so it was a few years before he got something else going. And he kind of found his feet in German TV, working on a cop show called Tatort. I'm not going to try to pronounce it correctly because I don't know how. But
He doesn't care, folks. German listeners, write in and just slam Cam's pronunciation.
I think my accent work has been proven time and time again on this podcast to be very poor, so I'm not even going to try to nail it.
At least he didn't do that, actually. Let's be fair. That's the true Christmas gift we've received, is Cam not doing a German accent.
That's right. So Schwentke did a couple more movies in Germany, Tattoo, and another one I'm not going to try to name because it's a complicated word. But he found his place in Hollywood. In 2005, he did the Jodie Foster film Flight Plan. And then he went off and did the Eric Bana, Rachel McAdams film, The Time Traveler's Wife. And that kind of established him as someone who could work within the studio. And that led right into Red.
I've seen The Time Traveler's Wife, so I remember that being rather nice sort of rom-com affair. Not comedy, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I saw it. I think it was okay. I know people who read the book said it was a real disappointment, but I hadn't read the book, so it didn't mean anything to me.
I always get that one mixed up with the other one that I think Rachel McAdams is in.
The Notebook?
With no, what's the other one with a time-traveling boyfriend? It's got the guy from
In Time. No,
In Time.
that's not it. That's with Justin Timberlake. About Time.
About Time. Is that Rachel McAdams as well?
I think it is.
Wow. She loves time-traveling boyfriends.
Apparently, I never made that connection. Good job, Scott.
Look at me.
And Flight Plan, a little bit of a spy connection, is sort of a loose remake of The Lady Vanishes, the Hitchcock spy thriller.
Oh, is there anything spy-worthy in it that we're going to look at, or is it contextually changed, like it's not about it?
Yeah, they changed the context, but kind of the idea of someone going missing in a confined mode of travel. That's kind of the same part.
Okay.
And they kind of spin it off from there.
I mean, there's probably more places you could hide someone on a train than a plane.
Yeah.
That probably has a shorter runtime.
I remember the twist for, like, Flight Plan was very poor. That's to the best of my memory.
The twist is there's a second plane underneath the whole time, upside
they had
down.
a cable. It was like Cliffhanger. They had the cable and they were shimmying back and forth.
What a twist.
Since then, Schwentke, though, really has not had the best of luck because he did R.I.P.D., which was that, like, quite expensive Ryan Reynolds kind of Men in Black with the supernatural riff with Jeff Bridges that was like a real bomb.
It got the same treatment that Cowboys and Aliens did, which is something we covered on the Patreon recently. Like, high concept, big cast, terrible reception.
Yeah, and then he went and did Insurgent and Allegiant, the two sequels to Divergent. And I remember Allegiant was such a dud, they didn't even make the final film in the franchise. And then he did Snake Eyes, the G.I. Joe Origins film.
Oof. Which is kind of a spy film, I think.
Yeah, God, I hope not. But I'd have to revisit the Wikipedia on that one.
Yeah, Cam's not going to revisit the film. He'll look at the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, so, yeah, he's gone back and he's still doing movies in his, German films and whatever.
Mhm.
But I don't know, like, it just seems like he's someone who, if you give him decent material, clicks. But let's be honest, the scripts for R.I.P.D. and Snake Eyes are not strong.
No, and if you're a director at that sort of level, you're not getting the sort of power to be, I'm not going to do this script, and we're not going to do that script, I'm going to do this one. You're working for a studio, and you're basically saying, you're not going to get a job, or you're going to do this script.
Exactly. Yeah, and
So
it's not an insane thing to me to take, say, Snake Eyes. It's like a major franchise offering you a movie that's basically like kind of a reboot.
Yeah.
If it succeeds, then you're in pretty good standing, right?
that's you for 2 sequels.
Exactly.
Or at
yeah.
least to have like exec producer status for 2 sequels and get some money that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so shortly after, they have a director, they're also finalizing their casting.
Uh-huh.
John C. Reilly has been in discussions to play the Marvin role. And he falls out fairly close to production from discussions. And so John Malkovich was the last member added to the principal cast shortly before production.
I don't want to imagine that film.
Really? I think that might actually be fun.
I'm not a big John C. Reilly guy, I have to say.
Okay.
Never quite worked for me. Even like Step Brothers doesn't really work for me too much, despite having 2 Step Brothers. No, I think what we ended up with is the proper version.
Well, it makes more sense if they're all retired, right? Like John C.
Yeah.
John C. Reilly's a little too young.
John C. McGinley, that's a different casting altogether.
Yeah, I was gonna say McGinley. I was those 2 names. Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be much more regimental
Mm.
if you had McGinley in there. But yeah, okay.
Yes.
No, I think Malkovich is the Malkovich.
So this movie had a budget of $58 million. Domestically, it did 90.3. International, 108.6 for a worldwide total of $199 million.
That's okay.
Pretty good. $58 million budget. This movie was a hit.
Yeah, you struggle sometimes to think like, oh, it didn't make 500 or $1 billion or something. That it's an absolute fail. But they're only spending 60 million on this. You do that Hollywood math of doubling it to 120, and it gets 200. That's plus you at this point you add in like DVD sales and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, so probably doing all right for itself.
Definitely. And landed at number 38 for the year between Yogi Bear and Paranormal Activity 2.
Yogi Bear was a film?
Yeah.
Is it live action?
Yeah. It has an amazing teaser poster that's like one of the dirtiest jokes you could ever put on a kids movie poster, and I'll never forget it. It made me laugh so hard. Anyone Google that one.
I'm vamping whilst I Google it.
Yeah. It's the teaser poster.
Is this the one with just the 2 bears next to each other?
Yes. And what is the tagline?
So you've got one bear in front of the other bear,
Mm-hmm.
and it says, "Great things come in bears."
Mm-hmm.
And this is a kids' film, folks.
Uh-huh. It was a choice.
All right. I mean, and the both bears seem very happy with this scenario, I have to say.
It's one heck of a picnic.
Oh, we could go down that well, but we're not going to.
Yeah. So yeah, the top 3 for the year, and we did these fairly recently because we talked about Cats and Dogs 2 from 2010. But number 1 was
Don't mention Cats and Dogs 2.
Toy Story 3. Number 2 was Alice in Wonderland, and number 3 was Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. And just a couple final notes. This movie was nominated for the Golden Globes for Best Picture, Musical or Comedy. And I was kind of surprised initially because Red was, decently reviewed, but I saw that Best Musical Comedy nomination and I was like, really? What else was nominated? So I went and looked at the list. The Tourist, Burlesque, Alice in Wonderland, and The Kids Are All Right. Bit of a thin year.
Slim pickings that year. Actually, of all those, this has got a good chance of winning. What did win?
The Kids Are All Right, which is a fantastic movie.
Okay, I can't comment.
Yeah, it was an Annette Bening, Mark Ruffalo film. Very good.
Okay. Well, then there you go. The right film won. But interesting that the other ones didn't jump out to me either.
No, The Tourist is not a comedy, so that's an interesting placement.
It's not musical either, as far as I'm aware.
No, that was like one of those things where they just wanted stars to show up, so they nominated it. It was a choice. It's like the year The Martian won Best Comedy at the Golden Globes.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, that did
The
happen.
Martian won Best Comedy.
Yeah.
Did Matt Damon accept the award?
I don't remember. It was probably the director, maybe Ridley Scott, or maybe the producer accepted it.
Yeah, I'm not sure Matt Damon would be running up the stage to get the wrongly classified Emmy for his film, or Grammy, or whatever you said it was.
Golden Globe.
Emmy? Whatever.
Yeah.
He got an EGOT for The Martian, apparently.
And just my final note. In 2015, they announced that they were developing a Red TV series for NBC, and nothing has been heard since, but you never know.
Well, like any good spy, they've been running for 8 years now. We just are not able to watch it.
Yeah. I was surprised when I did the research on this one, kind of like what a journey this property went through. Because to me, when I see the movie, I don't necessarily think to myself, like, I'm sure that this went through a lot of iterations and a lot of hard pitches to get made.
Well, you may have already said this, but what was the exact, or close to the date that the original pitch was made to Warner Brothers?
I don't have a clue.
I thought it was in your notes. I wonder how long that gestation period was.
The initial one? Well, they had to clear all the rights, so it was several years.
So maybe there was, at some point, potential of Red coming out in, 2004?
Possibly. Yeah.
Around the time of the Bournes, in between the James Bond changeover. It could have been a very different film.
Yeah, that would have made sense if you've got... I mean, it is kind of Bourne, right? Like the whole agent that has been kind of not part of that world being dragged back in. Like, that's the kind of thing that would generate interest.
Yeah, and you've also haven't had Taken at that point. You have by this point. So the idea of an older agent, an older actor coming and being the action star wasn't... I mean, it was a thing that was being done for a long time, but Taken was the thing that really pushed that type of film into popularity, I would say. That was really the sort of watershed moment for those films. So doing this in 2004 would have been quite revolutionary.
Yeah, and really repopularized the idea of kind of the older actor as action hero. Bruce Willis had been doing action movies all along, but suddenly there was probably even more of a demand to have him headlining these things when you've got Liam Neeson and Kevin Costner and various others starring in these movies as well.
But like having Dame Helen Mirren running around in 2004 with a machine gun, very different.
Yeah. 2010, she's an Oscar winner. And has much more of kind of a pop culture appeal. So there was like a real marketability to having Helen Mirren with that machine gun in those trailers.
Well, so I think that's the point where obviously, she's won that and she's very much a known quantity in America. Obviously, Helen Mirren's known to us here in Britain because she's British. So I don't know if it would attract as well in 2004. Has she done as much back then?
Well, she'd been a critical darling for decades and like a very, very, very respected actress here, but I don't know that she was considered a star. Like, I don't think the average person necessarily knew who she was.
Okay. Well, Mate, to be fair, it could have been the case that they wouldn't have been cast the same if they'd done this in 2004. Could have been a very different film.
Sure.
We'll never know. But Cam, do you smell gas? I'm coming over a bit faint. No, I'm just kidding. But we need to take a look at this film, our festive film of the year 2023, Red. Let's get down to it. Cam, why don't you lead us off? What do you think of Red?
Red is
That's the title.
interesting. Yeah, this may be the most mainstream movie that ever mainstreamed. Like, it feels to me almost like every element of it is just sanded down so that no human being could ever walk out of this movie feeling put off by anything in it. It is just completely like by the numbers stuff where I was like, it's funny, but it's not too funny. It has some, violence, but it's never particularly tense or anything like that. Like, it's the kind of movie that you and I could sit and watch. My parents could sit and watch and be like, oh, that was cute.
And you could probably show it to your kids as well if you had kids, and it wouldn't be that bad either.
No, like, you can look at, say, like, some of the more violent moments. For example, when they bat the explosive at the guy and he explodes, but it's done almost like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah, there's no blood or anything.
Like, it doesn't even feel particularly violent. No. So, like, this movie to me is almost like synthetic feeling.
Okay.
Even though I like a lot of the parts. And a movie I kept thinking about while I was watching it was The Whole 9 Yards. Do you remember that movie?
The Matthew
Perry. Yeah. Matthew Perry was in it, but Bruce Willis was the star of that one as well.
Okay, yeah.
And it was sort of like a silly hitman comedy that had a supporting cast that was great. You had Michael Clark Duncan, you had Rosanna Arquette, Natasha Henstridge. You had a bunch of really capable actors around, Bruce Willis and Matthew Perry. It wasn't particularly great, but it had some like fun vibes and people enjoyed it. And it produced a sequel that no one cared about. Maybe it rings a bell. I kept thinking about that movie watching this, where it feels a little bit like a Bruce Willis kind of paycheck job to a certain degree. Like, it has like those elements though that I think make it fun. Like, and it's the casting. When you have like some of the best actors alive in this silly kind of trifle of a movie, it clicks. Like, it is a lot of fun to watch. But there's a lot of story elements that I just thought, I've seen this done before in a way that was exciting to watch. And this movie is just giving me kind of the very blah version of it. But there was stuff I enjoyed. So I guess I'm mixed on it. Maybe I sound negative there, but like there's a lot I can talk about in terms of what I enjoyed. It just feels like a movie that honestly, if you ask me in like a year what I think of the movie Red, I'm going to be like, oh boy, I can remember the actors in it.
It's interesting. For many reasons. The one thing that jumps out to me is when I was writing my notes for this, I usually have like 4 likes and 4 dislikes. I try and split any film, even the bad ones and the good ones. I try and have dislikes and likes for everything. I struggle to write 4 likes. But if you were to ask me, which you are, because it's the show where we talk about the films, do I like this film? Yes. I think it's perfectly serviceable, entertainment. It hits its mark. I mean, it probably overstays its welcome a little bit for me at the 2-hour mark. It could have been an hour and a half in my book.
Yeah, I think the sequel's longer, I think.
Oh wow. Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
We will.
But like, it's absolutely fine. This is a film. I mean, it's a 12A here in the UK. You can basically take anyone to this film, and it's 4 quadrant, I suppose, as you're going to get. I think I'm understanding how 4 quadrants work, but it's playing for everyone here. The only reason why this works for me, really, when I dug into it, is the supporting characters.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of the leads, which I think I'm going to get into. But if it wasn't for John Malkovich and Helen Mirren, I think this would be a completely forgettable affair. But those two seem to elevate the material past whatever that script was, whatever the director was doing, whatever restrictions were in place by the leads of the film, just to be very memorable. And everything I think I'm going to remember about this film is going to be things that they said or did.
Even Brian Cox, who shows up for, he has much less time on screen than, say, Malkovich or Mirren, but like, you're bringing on an old pro. and basically telling him have fun. And he
Yeah.
does. And Ernest Borgnine showing up.
I was going to say Ernest Borgnine. I didn't think I'd be writing notes about Ernest Borgnine in my Red review, but he has
Yeah.
2 notes.
Yeah, like he was fun.
Yeah.
And Morgan Freeman has very little to do. Very
Sure.
little to do in this movie. But like there's a moment where he's talking about having, stage 4 cancer and has this little moment where I'm suddenly like, Morgan Freeman is just in this moment acting in like an Academy Award nominated performance. Like he is
There's
just
a gleam in his eye.
Yes!
Like, he just sort of comes through,
It's
doesn't he?
crazy. I'm watching this
Yeah.
very silly spy comedy, and suddenly Morgan Freeman is just like gazing off into the horizon, contemplating an entire life lived, and I'm like drawn into watching this master of his craft perform, and I'm like, that's why you get Morgan Freeman to take this small role.
Well, it's a human moment because he's like, I didn't think my life would end up this way in this retirement home. I didn't think I would go out in this fashion, but hey, it's been fun, and you just think, oh, well, that's pretty real and raw. Ow.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I it seems like we're kind of in simpatico there in sort of loving the supporting cast. But yeah, in terms of my overall thoughts, like, yeah, I think this is entertaining. This is not a film I'm going to turn my nose up at. If I'm at Christmas dinner in a at time of listening in a few days' time, and someone says, "Hey, what's on television?" and Red happens to be on, I'm not going to be like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
turn that off." I'm like, okay. There's things to enjoy. There's things to watch. I think some of the sequences are great, which we'll get into. There's lots of things to enjoy, but there's also a lot of detractions, and so I want to get to that too. But let's focus on the joy, the festive joy of this film. What's something you want to highlight in terms of likes?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's that cast.
Yeah,
And it is, I think, finding comedy in like the performances of John Malkovich and Helen Mirren. Those two in particular, I think, get the great stuff. And some of it's not even the world's greatest material.
no,
You look at like Malkovich, where like the gag is he's like hyper paranoid and has been someone who's on LSD for like 11 years or something like that. And he's completely whacked out. And they're giving him like silly props, like, oh, carry this stuffed pig around. And it's not like the greatest of material, but you watch the way he commits to it.
yeah,
And that he is finding like a real character in this. Like, it's actually fun to watch him bring this kooky individual to life. And he's consistent throughout. And every time he pops up, that performance is so defined.
Uh-huh.
I have watched so many blockbusters, for example, and especially in recent days, I'm thinking of some of the, say, the Marvel movies and things like that, where I'm seeing characters on screen for an extended period of time throughout the course of a movie who I don't even have a good sense of the personality of.
Mm-hmm.
And like John Malkovich has that personality nailed his very first scene. And that's something I really appreciate. And Helen Mirren, it's the same thing. The joke is basically Helen Mirren with a machine gun, but it works. And it's not the sort of like gag that only works once. Every time they bring her on, she's like one of the best actresses like alive. And so when you have her just, sniping people and talking to Mary-Louise Parker about, her relationship with Bruce Willis, I'm like, this works. Like, she can sell this.
Yeah, and she's gone on to do quite a few action films apart from the sequel, but like she's also in the Fast films now for some reason. And wasn't she a villain in a DC film recently?
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot she was the villain in Shazam too. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone forgot that film.
They did, to be fair, yes. Yes. I mean, I almost forgot Shazam 2 as well. So
I wonder what made more money in the end, Red or Shazam 2?
Which made money would be Red 2. Or sorry, Red 1, I should say.
Sorry, Zachary Levi. But I completely agree. And it's interesting, another similarity, and the time is going to be off for this one, folks, because of us pre-recording things and doing things out of schedule. But we recently recorded an episode for the Patreon on Die Hard 2.
Yeah.
Sort of a Bruce Willis connection. And one thing we really loved about that film is it's just this fleshed out characters and this lived in world. And I think this film is very good at that too, and especially with the names that we've mentioned, in giving them fully fleshed out characters with sometimes very little screen time. Morgan Freeman, like you mentioned, doesn't get a lot, but you understand exactly where he's coming from. And I think that's something that Die Hard 2 does well, and this film does well as well.
Yeah, and I actually think like too with Helen Mirren and the romance with Brian Cox's character, the way they like set that up, that she, was in love once and shot him 3 times because she had to for her job. And the way they connect that with Brian Cox later, I'm like, this is actually kind of like a touching, mature adult love story worked into this movie. Like, it's silly, it's having fun, but it works. Like, I just enjoy watching these two performers bounce off one another.
Well, it's not played like for laughs. It's not played big. It's sort of subtle between the two actors, and they know exactly what film they're in, and they know what level to pitch that at. And the whole like 3 bullets thing works because it's show don't tell. I know Helen Mirren gives you the exposition that she shot her boyfriend 3 times in the chest, but she doesn't go, "Oh, I shot Brian Cox's character blah in the chest 3 times," and then he doesn't go, "Oh, I was shot by blah 3 times." They tell you the 2 bits of information and expect you to connect it in your head. And I appreciate that little bit of sort of a little bit of credit given to the audience to be able to put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, and it's like a kind of broad, silly movie, but they take that relationship seriously. And I enjoyed that. And actually, when you're talking about this movie, you tend to focus on all kind of your like major headliners, and Karl Urban in this movie I actually think is very strong. And what I liked about that character was that he may have the most interesting character arc in the movie. He might. It's a good argument, I think. And to see someone who, when he's set up, you're immediately going to think the Bourne Supremacy. We've seen Karl Urban in this role, playing like an asset who has to hunt down your lead. And the way they have this character who has this kind of like awakening as to what is actually going on, and over the course of the movie is conflicted. I found that actually interesting, the way that his home life informs his decisions. It felt like a character who had genuine conflict, and a lot of villains, especially in a movie like this, would be very silly or very simple. And I felt like they were actually kind of like putting in a little bit of extra work to make the Karl Urban character interesting.
I mean, I had an awakening when I saw Helen Mirren in that dress firing that chain gun. I never thought I could be so turned on, but here we are.
Well, true enough. And actually, Richard Dreyfuss, very fun, one-note role.
Turned you on, did he?
Well, he didn't turn me on, but Richard Dreyfuss, it's kind of a one-note role playing this arms dealer, but chewing the scenery big time and a lot of fun.
For sure. One thing I wanted to highlight in the like section, I kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, is just some of the set pieces I think are quite good. I think the sort of house invasion at the start is pretty well done with like the bullets in the frying pan. There's just little touches of something different, something cool that we've not necessarily seen much of before. I mean, a lot of the stuff is probably stolen from like Bronson action flicks in the 70s and things like that. I mentioned, I was talking to you about The Mechanic earlier for some reason, but like stuff like that is probably bored into my head a little bit. But there's like a car chase where that sort of step out comes out, and there's the whole when they're trying to abduct the vice president later on in the film, in quite a protracted sequence throughout this whole building. It's all very well done, and I appreciate some good action and some good stunt work and some memorable sequences, because a lot of this stuff, we've seen it in some of our recent films like Ghosted, can feel very generic. It can just sort of all blend into one. I mean, Ghost is probably a good example, a bad example, I should say, because there was some good stuff in there. But, Heart of Stone is one I've watched recently that I can't remember any sequence from that film whatsoever.
No, I actually can't either. And that movie is much more action-driven even than Ghosted.
Yeah.
And boy, it's all just gone now. I mean, we're going to revisit Heart of Stone, I think, in the new year. So we'll see if we feel differently. But yeah, even like the moment here where you have the face-off between that, woman assassin and John Malkovich. And it's like a duel. And he has like a Magnum and she has a bazooka. And the moment you get the slow motion kind of bullet hitting the bazooka and, blows her completely off screen.
You get the Robin Hood going into the arrow
Yeah,
thing.
Yeah. Like there's some fun little bits. And I think this movie does a good job in giving you kind of that, action you would expect in this type of genre piece in a way that feels heightened and kind of fun. Like, it's like I said, like you could show this to, my parents or frankly anyone's parents, and they would probably just find the vibe of it fun. It feels like they did a very good job walking the line as to what they wanted this movie to be.
I think it does sort of brush between trying to be a very plotty spy thriller from times and then a wacky action film. And I think the tone doesn't always quite mesh for me personally, which maybe I'll get into. But I know what you mean. It does all feel quite heightened. But I think it also wants to have sort of a, No Way Out or Tenet level of plot complexity when I don't think the film necessarily calls for that.
Memo to future spy movie makers: if you're making something like a Red, that's very light and frothy, you do not have to have a convoluted plot.
No, and I remember we had an episode a while back where I proposed a scale in which we could measure things in terms of plot complications and just how like complex it is. And the suggestion we had, I think the one that won in my mind was a tenetometer.
I'm not going to try to say that.
Tenetometer. Look at me go. That's
there you
pretty
go.
good. Yeah, but on the tenetometer, this film is more Tenet than it is Spy Kids 3.
Right. I would say like we have to have on this meter probably 1 to 5. I think that's a good gauge.
Okay, so you don't want to go full Tenet, which is a 5.
That is a 5. I would say that this is maybe like it's a 2 or a 3, I'd say.
I'd say it's trying to be a 4 in terms of its complexity. I'm not saying I was overly... I didn't find it overly complicated. I found it tried to be overly complicated.
It feels like a movie that feels like it has to like really be convoluted because so many spy movies are, but
because spy movies have
it doesn't
twist.
It doesn't feel committed to a convoluted story. Like you're just kind of like jumping through hoops and doing this globe-trotting thing. I was like laughing as I was taking notes because whenever I'm taking notes and I'm watching a movie where they keep bouncing locations, I'll just write the location name quickly in my notes, and I was doing it like every 3 lines.
And you take a shot of eggnog every time they change locations.
Of course.
And that's why you're just all over the place now.
That's right. But it was just like, we are bouncing all over the place just to get like exposition to connect to the next location, even though all these locations are basically Toronto.
Yeah, I was going to say backlot somewhere, but yeah, basically just Canada, sure.
Yeah, they did a bit of shooting in New Orleans, but Toronto is the majority of the shooting.
Okay. It did feel like they were actually in New Orleans. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to call out in terms of likes, and I'll see if you have any more afterwards, is I mean, at one point I was like, there's a lot of plot holes here. There's a lot of holes. This is like Swiss cheese. And then I realized I don't care.
Yeah.
It's entertaining enough where it doesn't bother me. And it's not, it doesn't like, and that's why maybe you're more right on the tenetometer scale being a 2 or a 3, because you should just approach this film with an open mind and without sort of the critical hat on. It's just entertainment. There isn't much here in terms of like substance. Which I would take as a benefit. I think that's an up because I could acknowledge it and just go into it to have fun. Because if you approach this uber critical, I think you'll just be it's like pulling teeth.
I think there's movies that do it better though. Like if I'm watching,
sure.
say, like we haven't covered it on the show, but like Mr. and Mrs. Smith is like much better at having momentum and just carrying you on this kind of like silly rom-com spy thriller versus like this movie. You are like investigating a like dead reporter's like information they had, and I'm just like, this isn't even a character. Who am I investigating at this point? We're going to see this character's mother, and there's this whole list. And wait,
the massive like exposition drop in the library that takes like 10 minutes. You just think, is this what your propulsive spy comedy needs?
When you're tying it to the vice president played by Julian McMahon. And I'm like, what are we doing? Like, this is so complex, but for no reason. Because it's not like when you get to the end and find out ultimately who is behind it all. You're like, oh my God. Like, what a revelation. You kind of get it once Richard Dreyfuss shows up as this like very scene-stealing kind of like, mustache-twirling villain. You're like, this guy's probably the bad guy.
Yeah. That didn't take much of a twist in my head. Is there any other likes you've got? I might have one more if not.
No, I think that kind of sums up. I would just say like in general, it's just the vibe of it when it's like not getting bogged down in plot stuff. It really does work. Like it just has a light, breezy energy. And you were mentioning the kind of thing you could watch on TV. Here, in North America, we had the TBS station, which was famous for playing movies over and over and over again. And so a lot of the movies I grew up with would be played ad nauseum on TBS and various channels like that. And at a different point in time, Red would have been played on that channel like once a week.
We have similar channels. Sky Movies is the one that pops to mind, I should say.
Who's had the eggnog now?
Well, I've been drinking it whilst you were talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sky Movies, this is, I imagine, would have been a staple had Sky Movies been in sort of the way it was when I was growing up. It's a bit different now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm quite surprised we spent so much time on the likes. I struggled writing them down, but it's obviously we found some things to love.
It is a breezy diversion, which isn't maybe necessarily quite the bar they wanted to hit. I think they want you to walk out and be like, that movie was a blast. And I never felt that way, but it was a painless sit.
For sure. And I didn't say much about it, but Karl Urban, I mean, much as the whole Bourne Supremacy is basically the same character for a good portion of this film until he takes a turn at the end to the good side, he is a bit of a powerhouse in here too. Like, I don't think I gave him enough love at the start. He is carrying the weight of, like, the CIA behind him the entire time. He's the one that's sort of pushing the plot forward on the other side of things. And he's just come off of 2009 Star Trek. He's just done all the Lord of the Rings films. His star is very much rising at this point, pretty high, I'd say, his profile. And he does a lot with his screen time. I really appreciate what Karl Urban does here.
That was maybe my biggest surprise revisiting the movie, was that I was quite impressed that Karl Urban had a villain that actually, or antagonist more so, who actually had like a defined arc.
And is actually intelligent and is given some time to be smart.
A lot of the movie feels like it's almost like a cartoon, and his character doesn't. Like, his character actually feels like a thinking person.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll just add, in terms of Karl Urban, a little bit of a spy connection for everyone. In the film, you see Karl Urban's house a couple of times, where his family lives. It's the same house that's used in The Jackal from 1997, starring Bruce Willis.
Good Lord. Good Lord.
What a connection.
That's crazy. Do you think Bruce Willis was aware of that when he saw the movie at the premiere?
He's like, home sweet home. I'm so glad I got to come back here.
I bought that house with my Jackal earnings.
Richard Gere lives next door.
He's still doing that Irish accent.
I wish he'd stop.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Attention, SpyHards, diehards. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources, whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a hidden moon base. We're putting out the call for your support.
That's right, the SpyHards Patreon is the home to our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors, and The Debrief, where we activate our billion-dollar brains and predict how the spy movie news of today will shape tomorrow.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
The crazy Christmas chaos continues as we are looking at the 1990 action movie sequel, Die Hard 2, starring Bruce Willis. What happens when the same thing happens to the same guy twice? Is it just as fun? Find out.
So accept your mission and hop in the Helmmobile today at patreon.com/spyhards. But before Spectre agents intercept this broadcast, let's get back to the Spy Jinx. Okay, Cam, dislikes. I've got a couple of big ones, but I'd like you to lead us off.
I don't understand the central relationship of this movie at all.
It's bananas.
So, okay, you have the setup. Bruce Willis, he's retired. He apparently lives in a place that is entirely turquoise colored. This movie should have been called Turquoise, not Red, because turquoise is all over this movie. But that is a complete aside. So,
interior decorator Cam is coming out here. He's feeling fruity after the eggnog. Okay.
Anyways,
the drapes are all wrong.
Yeah. He calls this woman who handles like the pension funds for, retired agents. In the graphic novel, apparently, was just his handler, his former handler,
sure,
which I thought was interesting. Anyways, another side. But they are setting up this kind of like rom-com between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
Once we get to them meeting up, I don't understand anymore. Where he's like, well, I have to take you with me and kidnap you because they're going to come after you. And I'm like, wait, this feels like a bit of a leap. Feels like a bit of a leap in this scene. Because, like, I don't quite buy it. It feels like a real, like, leap for this character who, I assume Bruce Willis is an intelligent person, but he comes across as, like, a lunatic because he shows up in her apartment, like, having packed her bags and everything, and kidnaps her. And I'm like, okay, like, this doesn't work for me particularly, but in the world of very, very broad, goofy rom-coms, I'll go along with it.
Sure.
But her character is almost completely sidelined. Like, once you bring in Malkovich and Mirren and all that, her character is just sitting on the sidelines, listening to exposition, getting kidnapped, and yet at the end I'm supposed to buy that this was like a great love story, and I just don't think any of the love story works at all.
When you go back to basics with love stories, you need to have some sort of a chemistry between your two leads. And much as there's only about, I think, an 8-year difference between Bruce Willis and Mary-Louise Parker, so it's not. I know Bruce Willis tends to look older than he is, but there wasn't a big difference between the two of them. Despite that, there was just nothing there.
Yeah.
And I've seen Mary-Louise Parker play good roles. I've seen Mary-Louise Parker frustrate the hell out of me in some roles in the past. Same could be said for Bruce Willis. We mentioned the Jackal. And yet I've seen them both have good chemistry with other people.
Right.
In love stories, and that didn't feature here. And so you haven't got that spark to go from, but okay, we could still have some witty repartee, we could still have some good dialogue. That's not there either. And also, as a premise, the entire thing falls apart because, okay, let's just concede the film's set up that they are going to try and kill her. What's to stop her just going to the police station and say, these guys are trying to kill me, they're outside in the SUV with machine guns, could you protect me? And then she's protected.
Well, I mean, these CIA people seem pretty dangerous. I'm sure they could, I don't know that I would necessarily trust the police when I've got, like, Karl Urban and, like, the entire force of the CIA after me.
Yeah, but Karl Urban wouldn't allow her to be executed.
No. Oh, maybe at the start of the movie, but I don't think as you get further in, yeah.
No, and and I said to like, there's plot holes that I could pick, but just accept it as it is. But the problem is, like, there's meant to be this love story here, but it's built on a very shoddy premise. The fact that she would have any interest in this guy that's basically invaded her house, packed her bag for her, and then tied her up and taken her away.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like Stockholm Syndrome setting in here, and it gave me a vibe of a film that I've watched recently because we did an appearance on another show to talk about the film, but we haven't spoken about it here, which is Night and Day.
Right, yeah.
You got Tom Cruise whisking off Cameron Diaz on a spy adventure, and she's basically just pulled along. I think they're even like handcuffed together at one point, or something similar to that. And luckily, there's way more chemistry between those two in that film, so that kind of spark works a bit more, and you feel like there's a bit more of a give and take between the two of them. Whereas this feels very one-sided. Bruce Willis has all of the power in this situation the entire way through until she's basically, as you said, sidelined, and then any sort of power she had in the film is gone because she's just sitting in a prison cell.
And I wasn't a big fan of Ghosted by any stretch, but like Chris Evans and Ana de Armas are together on screen for the entire run of that movie, and you're seeing Chris Evans kind of come into his own over the course of the film. Whereas here the problem is they kind of set it up almost like it would be like a Romancing the Stone kind of idea.
I wrote that down. Yep.
They go out of their way to establish that the Mary-Louise Parker character, Sarah, is someone who like reads these novels, these kind of romance novels.
Well, it's like True Lies. Like she's working in this boring office job, and she's looking for excitement, adventure. She's reading these. I've heard it referred to as chick lit before, but and that's all fine. That's actually a really interesting premise, and True Lies does it really well as Romancing the Stone is probably the best premium article of that type of storytelling. But then she doesn't have that moment where she comes into her own and like takes the adventure into her hands that happens in all of those films that we just mentioned. But she's just this sort of bystander.
Well, it sets it up, when you have her reading Love's Savage Secret, that this is
originally the title of this show.
that this is somewhat her story. It's about someone who finds her place in the world because she's fantasizing. She meets a real spy, and Bruce Willis is looking for an excitement. It's about two people who are getting something out of each other that is going to take them somewhere in life that they would like to be. But suddenly you've got Morgan Freeman, John Malkovich, Helen Mirren, Brian Cox. They're all entering the picture and taking away most of the attention from this love affair.
Yeah.
And so it's suddenly like Mary-Louise Parker is standing there just watching very talented actors, make jokes and whatever. And she doesn't really factor into the spy plot because you suddenly have like 5 characters more capable of helping Bruce Willis than her. So,
yeah. But then, like, but there's other versions of this story where we would probably lament, and again, we're mentioning Ghosted. I don't know why, but like we lamented that Chris.
It's recent.
It's recent, yeah. We lamented when we spoke about Ghosted that Chris Evans became a super adept spy by the end of the film. Like it was too quick of a transformation. The True Lies TV show did the same thing, whereas the movie, for instance, took its time, and she wasn't even a good spy by the end, but she just got lucky.
Yeah.
This film does the opposite of that by sidelining her. So in a way, we shouldn't be critiquing it because it's not made her a super spy by the end of the film. But I think there is a middle ground somewhere where she could maybe stumble in and help or something like that and just have some agency at the end of the film. But because there are people better suited for all these missions, she is just pushed to one side because it's inconvenient to have her on the mission as a character.
And to me, like, the central story of Red is Bruce Willis and her, right? It's about their relationship.
It's two-handed.
And everything around it is kind of like orbiting around what this central story is.
Yeah.
And yet, when you get out of the movie, what do you remember? Nothing to do with that romance.
No. Although, I mean, she had me on the back foot pretty quickly on when she said she was disappointed that he was bald.
Oh, yeah. That must have stung, huh?
I took that to heart, I have to say.
When you have that quote, I'm kind of like, that seems rather harsh when you are dealing with like mature adults dating.
Yeah.
Because like Bruce Willis is in his 50s. Like, this is not an unusual thing when you're dating in your 50s. You know what I mean?
It happens to every guy, Cam.
It
Jeez.
does, but like for her to say that at that age is like, lady, let's be realistic.
No, I wouldn't argue that. I think you're allowed to have things you like and don't like in a partner. That's absolutely fine.
Sure.
But I wouldn't throw something at someone that they can't help.
Yeah, like she says it to his face.
Like I would never pick on someone's height, for instance. Like you can't help being, 3 foot tall, Cam.
That's right.
It's not your fault. But I would never judge you for it.
I was second place to play Napoleon in the new Ridley Scott film.
You are our Christmas elf this year.
That's right, I am. And I'm sitting on a shelf right now.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. What about you? What was a dislike for you?
There's 2 things that popped to mind. One's a dislike and one's something I noted in like looking at reviews at this film and a bit of a controversy that was sort of hanging over the film at release. I don't know if you were aware of this at all. So maybe we'll talk about the controversy first.
Okay.
Apparently there was a bit of a controversy with Morgan Freeman's character. Now, I've never seen the sequel. I don't know if this gets retconned in the sequel, but they send Morgan Freeman out to get killed.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I thought you were going to say about the moment where he's just like staring at the nurse's butt. I was like, that's kind of weird.
That's kind of just like an old man being an old man. That's fine.
Yeah.
But there was this, they send 2 white guys send a black guy out to get killed, which is a bit of a Hollywood trope, and it could have been anyone else. It could have been done differently. It didn't have to be set up in that way. Yada yada yada. Totally get that, and I don't know if you were aware of that controversy at all, and if you had any thoughts about it. Personally, it didn't jump out at me, but maybe it's just not because I'm not affected by that. I don't know.
No, yeah, it's funny because as soon as you say it, you're like, yeah, it is a very bizarre creative choice to make. And even in 2010, that would have been a bizarre choice to make. And I wasn't aware of the controversy because it's been so long since I remember anything, involving other people talking about Red. But
I just wondered if it come up in your research or anything like that, because there's articles written about it. Like there was some coverage when the film came out. People were saying, "Well, why did they send Morgan Freeman out?" I mean, it was because he had stage 4 cancer. It was that they set it up in the story as to why. It was nothing to do with him as a person, but.
Yeah, you make the choice when you cast the actor, though, that you may sometimes have to pivot because it does look weird.
Yeah.
I was honestly more taken aback ultimately by how unceremonious his exit from the movie was.
Sure.
Like, I thought that was so poorly done that jumped out to me more. I was like, really? Like, that's how you're dispatching, like, one of your primary characters? Like, okay, I guess.
Maybe it was just put in as, like, shock value. Like, oh, characters can die.
Yeah.
Which is, it's a screenwriting trick, old as time, to give some stakes to the story.
Does it feel weird, though, when you watch that scene, like that feels like a moment of real world violence in comparison to, like, I don't know, people like using like a bazooka as like a baseball bat and hitting an explosion at someone? Like, that stuff's very cartoony in contrast to that scene.
Well, it's not the thing I was going to mention in terms of dislikes, but there is a tone issue with this film.
Hmm.
Like, it is playing fast and loose. Like I said, it was trying to have a deep spy story, but at the same time, it wants to be like Looney Tunes at times with its like explosions and combat sequences. So, yeah, I guess it is a bit of a weird mesh of having him die in this sort of tragic way. Was it ever actually figured out who shot him, by the way?
I don't remember.
No.
I think it was just like a hit squad, wasn't it?
Yeah, but there's never like it was like called in by the CIA a lady or something like that. Like it was never actually established or attributed to anyone.
I don't think so.
Strange, but yeah, again, it didn't jump out to me watching the film. It's just me reading about it afterwards. And you know, if you guys have any thoughts about it, let us know. If you think it was a bad choice, a choice, or you didn't really care for it, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. It's a bit of an interesting. A bit of controversy, a bit of discussion that had happened around the film. Yeah,
which is interesting for a movie that is going out of its way to and be incredibly sanitized,
and also inclusive in many ways. You know, you're getting these older action stars, giving them opportunities in action films they wouldn't really have anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
But in terms of the actual dislike I had, it's Bruce Willis. It's a real shame. And, you know, bless his cotton socks. I watched a video of him the other day at the time of making this, and, you know, he's having a lot of trouble now. And he spoke some words on, I think, a TikTok video for his family, and he's struggling.
Yeah.
And he's given us so much in terms of acting, in terms of film, philanthropy. He's done a lot, Bruce. A lot of time for him. In this film, however, he is at the wrong gear. I've seen him play wacky. I've seen him play it straight in a drama. I felt like he thought he was in more of a drama, this film, than the lunacy that I think his character should have been going more towards. It felt like he should have been winking more at the camera, a la Die Hard or something like that. Whereas this, I don't know, he feels very grounded in a film that isn't.
I wonder if he felt he needed to be grounded because he was surrounded by such like broad characters around him. Like he had to be kind of the gravity of the movie. It's possible, but he also becomes then not particularly fun.
Yeah, this is where I got hung up
to watch. Like you're waiting for the other characters, which is why I was saying, like, you know, when I'm saying like you don't care about the relationship at the core of the movie, but he's 50% of that, and that character is not as much fun to watch.
I'm not dumping that all on her. That's both of them.
Yeah,
that's that lack of chemistry, and I think that's both. I actually think that Mary-Louise Parker's approach to the film is right. She's doing a lot of like eye rolls, and she's a really good face actor.
Yeah,
if you've ever noticed that, she's really good at expressions, which I've noticed in the past. She's got a really good scowl, but the script lets her down. Whereas I think the script is there for Bruce. He lets that script down.
I feel like I need to like revise like my thoughts as to Bruce Willis over the past, you know, many years of his stardom, like when you get towards the kind of the later days of it, because for a long time we were just completely baffled when there was all those, you know, terrible straight to video movies and stuff.
Yeah.
And there was that whole era where people would just talk about Bruce Willis is just showing up and phoning it in. And you'd see, you know, him show up in like G.I. Joe Retaliation and other things, and he just seemed so
3 or whatever it was.
Yeah, and he would seem so bored. But now you have to sit there and go, well, wait a second. Was he having early glimmers of, you know, obviously the issues he's dealing with now?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Only him and his doctor and family would know such a thing. But this is kind of the era around this time where people are starting to notice Bruce Willis seems bored in a lot of these movies. He doesn't seem to be bringing like the kind of the Bruce Willis energy we love so much in this movie. And I mean, he did Moonrise Kingdom around this point, so like you could see him really engaged in that film. But I think like, I don't know, maybe once you've made like 1 billion of these action movies and you're doing another one, you're like, yeah. But maybe that means he shouldn't have been doing this movie in the first place, especially like if you want to have a romance, you want to have two actors that click, and I don't even know if he was that interested in the material. I don't know. I also wonder, is he too young for this movie? because everyone around him, in terms of the previous coworkers, are all older. Malkovich, Helen Mirren, Morgan Freeman, they're older. Ernest Borgnine is way up there, and Bruce Willis looks like a kind of a young kid compared to them in a lot of the time.
Well, they call him Kid, which is hilarious, the concept of Morgan Freeman calling Bruce Willis Kid.
Yeah.
Well, I know there is actually an age difference there, but in my head, they both just are older statesmen.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought, but yeah, I don't know. I would be very curious to go back in time and see like what a 1990s version of like Bruce Willis doing something like this would feel like.
Or what the 2004 version of this film was with a different cast. I'd be interested to see that too.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, like, I think the premise here, I think is actually really cool. The whole idea of these like ex-spies that have retired and gone on to try and make lives for themselves, because being a spy can basically ruin your entire existence. You don't get to have ties, you don't get to have a family, you don't get to settle down. You just make enemies around the world the entire time. And if you make it to retirement, it's a hard transition, I imagine. You see that a lot with like military folks transitioning into civvy life, as they call it. It can be tough, and there's a very serious story there. There's also a great comedy there if you wanted it. But I just think Bruce either doesn't engage with the material, or just wasn't invested in this film, or didn't know how to play it the right way. For me, at least, I can't say you all felt the same. You may felt he was, pitch perfect for what this film needed to be. I just felt like the most interesting thing should be your lead.
Yeah.
It's one of those films where the people around the lead are more interesting. I always, in terms of spy movies, I go back to Gotcha a lot. Linda Fiorentino stole that film from Anthony Edwards, but she's a secondary character.
Well, I think back to The Whole Nine Yards, which I referenced earlier. Not a great movie, but he is like star power personified in that movie. Like, he is just like the magnetic core of that movie, and like every character, you understand why they're so kind of drawn to him. And I think there's supposed to be an element of that here.
Sure.
But I don't think it's there. It's not on screen.
No. We have more chemistry than Bruce Willis and Mary-Louise Parker.
So it seems.
I'll see you under the mistletoe.
Yeah. A dislike I want to throw out there as well before we kind of get to the end of this section is just this movie has a lot of action. It has a lot of like chases and things like that.
Sure.
There is almost no tension in this entire movie. And I found that to be the kind of thing that I don't really care when I'm watching kind of Malkovich have a duel. Like, that's kind of like silly stuff. When you're keeping it kind of a comedic and broad stuff, that's fun. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But like, there's the whole sequence where they break into the CIA headquarters.
Yeah.
Which could not have less tension if they tried. It feels like you can basically just walk right in.
Well, just put that up against Mission Impossible 1. Breaking into Langley.
Yeah, it's the same. They both like escape where they're like playing firefighters.
Yeah. I wrote that down in my notes. Play those side by side, and one is exceedingly tense. Like, it so much so that you sweat when you watch Tom Cruise hang from that ceiling with Jean Reno. I don't think I could tell you anything that happens in the hijinks of getting out of Langley. Apart from the costume change, funnily enough, in this film.
No, like the entire break into the CIA should feel like a heist. It should feel like something could go wrong. Oh my God, we might be discovered. And especially when you have Mary-Louise Parker going along for the ride, and you have her dealing with like the contacts, where they're in the elevator. That should like feel like there's some pressure, and there's just none. You don't feel anything.
That did, I think, get one of my only laughs of the film, though, is when she drops the contact on the floor and is like, "Are you going to help the general find his contact?" And they're like, "Oh, I guess."
Yeah.
That did get a giggle out of me.
Do you put contacts in your mouth and then put them in people's eyes? I thought that was weird.
I mean, I've got perfect 20/20 vision, so I've never once even had to wear contacts. And I actually have a phobia of people touching my eyes.
I mean, I have good vision as well, thankfully. But
everything else is in pieces, but my vision. You're going to want these eyeballs, folks.
You've got the hit list in this movie. I have a laundry list of physical issues that continue to...
We're both hunched over microphones whilst, like, crying in pain.
Yeah, they continue to multiply as I age. But, yeah, I mean, I have worn contacts for Halloween costumes.
Sure.
But when I saw her, like, pick that up, put it in her mouth, and then put it in his eye, I was like, ugh, oh, I don't like that at all.
Especially when it's been on the floor as well. Like, first of all, do you want to put that in your mouth? And second of all, it's not going to clean it, so you've just got her mouth germs and floor germs in liquid in your eyeball.
Yeah. Yeah, not very sanitary.
No. I'm sure he woke up with pink eye.
So, well, you had Red. The sequel should have been Pink, where he has like one pink eye the whole movie.
Yeah, maybe not the best film. Or maybe I should have called it Red Eye. But either way, let's just go over to sort of final notes. I've got a couple of bits and bobs beating around. One thing was there's a moment in the film where a CD begins to skip like a vinyl record.
Oh, okay.
Which is, okay, so CDs technically can skip,
Yeah.
but not like that. And that was a very weird thing that jumped out at me. And I know I said don't, put plot holes in it, poke out the holes in it. It's such a silly thing. They could have just had a vinyl record playing, and it would have made perfect sense. But they had a wall-mounted CD player that started skipping like a vinyl.
It's almost like in Batman Returns when they're playing the audio of Penguin putting down the people of Gotham live at the event, and then Batman like starts scratching the CD like it's a record, and it makes the sound like the scratching effect, and you're like, have these people never listened to music on a CD before?
I don't actually remember that, but that's outrageous.
It's crazy. Really crazy. Great movie, but crazy.
It's actually my favorite of the Tim Burton Batmans.
That is my favorite Christmas movie to go to every year.
Wow. Have you ever dressed up? I mean, I know you learnt to use the whip like Catwoman because of that film.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yes.
Not like Indiana Jones. It's because of Catwoman.
That is accurate. Yeah, 100%.
That's actually really impressitive. If you ever get a chance,
I'm not joking either. That's true.
He's not, folks. If Cam has a video, I'll see if I can put a little bit of it online if you want to see him and his whipping skills. All right, let us know. Write in spyhardspod@gmail.com. Do you want to see Cam whip? Is that your kink, folks? Is that your Christmas wish? You want to see Cam get his whip out? Well, write in. Another note I had is I just found the whole concept of what happens when you retire as a spy quite interesting, and all their sort of different lives they've gone on to live. And it's I actually think I would probably be John Malkovich.
Yeah, okay, I can see that.
I've got a little bit of a prepper thing anyway. I've got a little bit of that bug. I have a bug out bag.
What?
See, he doesn't even know. Preppers, you're with me. A bug out bag is basically a bag that you can grab in your house if you need to leave in an emergency. It's not like an overnight bag that's got some underwear in it. This has got a month's worth of medication in there, first aid kit, wind up radio, bits and bobs like that, band-aid, sort of medical kit, stuff like that.
I mean, I'm sure people have those here in North America, but I don't think they're called bug out bags.
I think they are.
Yeah, I don't have one. I don't have one.
What are you grabbing in an emergency in your house? What are you running out with?
The Star Wars collection.
My figures!
Yeah.
The house is on fire, sir. But Obi-Wan!
Save my vintage Yak Face figure. Yeah.
The Yak Face!
Blue Snaggletooth.
You did it all for the Snaggletooth. Okay, well, that's what you're grabbing. I'll be grabbing my bug out bag. And if I'm crazy, let me know, folks. What about you? Any notes, Cam?
Just the note that it was interesting seeing Julian McMahon show up as the vice president, sort of this cowering dude. And like that was the era where they were still trying to make him like a film actor, because you had the Fantastic Four films, and those hadn't really clicked. And when he showed up, I was like, oh yeah, I remember when I used to see this guy in movies. It's been a while.
Wasn't he in Nip Tuck?
Yeah, that's where he got famous, and maybe he's doing TV now, but I think there would have been more of a moment of like, oh wow, Julian McMahon in 2010 when I saw the movie versus a lot of audiences now.
I don't think anyone's ever said, whoa man, Julian McMahon's here. Yeah, party time.
I think in 2010 people would have been like, oh my god, it's the guy from Nip Tuck, versus now where you're just like, I wonder if this plays anymore.
I don't know. Nip Tuck fans, let us know. I think I've just seen bits of that show. I've never really been into it.
I've never seen it.
No. You probably should, looking at you.
Christmas is here, Scott. That's the present I'm looking for.
That's it. I'll send it to you. Well, that's my final question before we get to the knock list. We haven't really mentioned Christmas too much. This is our Christmas film of the year. How does this work as a Christmas film for you?
I think there's enough in terms of like, decorations and just kind of like acknowledgement of Christmas to be kind of a very, very, very low key Christmas movie. Like I could see like TBS playing this around Christmas.
Sure.
But the fact that you and I had to actually like do the research to determine if this was a Christmas movie before watching it means that it's mostly superficial.
I think it's about as much as the package is. That has just some sort of settings as well. No one's in Christmas outfits or talking about Christmas.
Agreed. And it's more so than, say, like The French Connection.
True. Which is our Patreon Christmas film of the year, apart from Die Hard 2, which we're also covering on the Patreon, patreon.com/SpyHards, cheap plug, there it is. I think, there's this whole thing in North America, you don't really get it here, of covering your houses in Christmas decorations outside. You do get it from house to house or tiny little things, but that seems to really go over the top over the Atlantic.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd be very much more Bruce Willis's vibe.
My parents go all out. I don't really do that, though, in my apartment.
Do you have any frontage you could decorate?
Yeah, I actually do. I have a balcony I could, I suppose, but I don't.
What are you putting out there if you could?
I just don't want to.
I'm
too tired, Scott. I just don't want to.
He is Scrooge. He's our elf and our Scrooge. He's everything.
No, but to answer that seriously, like if I had the money and the time and I was invested, I would do something like maybe like find large figures of like the Rankin Bass, Rudolph, and Abominable Snowman characters or something.
Okay, it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I would do something overt and huge, but I am a spy and I don't want to show off my location too much.
Yeah,
I don't want Santa to know where I live.
Makes sense.
He's coming after me. Well, okay, folks, knock list time. Red has 2 chances to get onto the knock list because it has 2 films in the franchise. The first one is up, and the question goes to you, Cam. Red, is it making the nice or naughty list this year?
Red is not getting a green onto the knock list
he's
for
been
me.
planning that one all day.
No, that is a momentary improv moment there.
You can tell.
Thank you. No, like it's an amusing enough diversion, but like this movie is not going to stick with me. And I think one of the key elements of the knock list is these are movies that are going to stick with you, and Red does not stick the landing there.
And the disavowed list is also the same. It's going to stick with you for the wrong reasons.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay. 1 no. I get your reasons, Cam. I think we've highlighted them pretty well in this episode. I wanted to really like this going into it, and there are bits I like. I think it's a good concept. I just think it's not executed as well as it could be. It gets more points because of John Malkovich and Helen Mirren and Morgan Freeman and a couple of other names. Ernest Borgnine as well in that list. And I think if those people weren't there, I think this would be a very forgettable affair.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, I just don't know if there's enough on the page to take it to the next level, so you had to get that heavy star wattage to probably get the attention and the money it got.
Yeah, but it got it. It got a sequel, but for me, it's also a no. A lot to enjoy. It's one of those ones that I didn't have a bad time watching it. I don't think I could badmouth it too much. I did enough, but you know, I'm going to butcher someone's. I think it was AJ Chowdhury who said this on the show a while back when we covered one of the Dean Martin films. But you know, your mind works best like a parachute when open. You know, like this, you just need to approach this with an open mind and just have a bit of fun with it. That doesn't mean it's knock list worthy, unfortunately. But if someone's going to put Red on and I'm there, I'd probably still watch it.
I watched this back to back with Die Hard 2, and having this movie follow Die Hard 2, I was like, oh, this is a come down. This is a bit of a come down.
Very much a palate cleanse from Die Hard 2.
Yeah, like just watching like how effective the action is in Die Hard 2, and then watching some of the stuff here, and I'm like, oh, yeah, we used to have it pretty good in the 90s.
Oh man, those were the days.
Yeah,
those really were the days. There you go, folks. 2 no's. Red is not making the knock list. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. Ooh-wee, we did it. Another Christmas movie in the bag.
That's right, I know.
There's only a few left, and there's a couple of heavy hitters.
I mean, once you've tackled the favorites, the package, and Red, where else is there left to go in future Christmases?
To be fair, we've also done The Long Kiss Goodnight on Her Majesty's Secret Service, so
yeah.
We've had some heavy hitters as well, but there's a couple of ones left that are often mentioned to us, one specifically.
One huge one, and then one that Scott and I desperately want to do.
Yes, this film that we're not going to mention was very close to making this year's pick.
Yeah,
very close. I'll give you a hint. There's an Uzi on the cover.
Merry Christmas.
To us all. But question goes to you, Cam. We're in the season of giving. Historically, we have some interesting stuff over the New Year's period for everyone. But what have we got in everyone's stocking this year for Christmas?
Yes, the holidays will be in full swing, so Scott and I will be taking a break from our normal programming, but that doesn't mean there won't be exciting SpyHards content. We are dropping a fantastic interview with writer Seth Lockhead about the 2011 spy thriller Hannah, a movie we are a huge fan of, and he takes us on a journey right from the kind of the origins of that story right through production. It is a absolutely fascinating interview for people who really love the movie Hannah like we do.
Absolutely. It's a film we've spoken about ad infinitum. We always recommend people check it out. It's one of those unknown spy films that's actually on the knock list of things we recommend. And getting this opportunity to speak to Seth is something I've been trying to work out for quite some time. So I'm glad we finally got it together. And if you're a fan of Hannah or you're a budding screenwriter, it is a fantastic chat, and you'll learn a lot, not only about the film, but the process of getting a script made, what some of the obstacles you have to go through, because it really is his baby. He took it from concept to delivery. And it's definitely one to tune in for. So that'll be coming out next week, and then we'll be back in the new year with our usual wrap-up episode looking at the best and the worst of 2023.
That's right.
So, folks, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to tune in next week for our wonderful chat with Mr. Seth Lockhead. We, of course, wish you all a wonderful Merry Christmas. We hope you have a wonderful festive season with friends and family and food and more. And make sure to become a SpyHards die-hard. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And if you don't already, make sure you follow us discreetly, as always, on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next time, folks, I never thought I'd have to say this again. I'm getting the pig.